You ready, Lo?
Yep. I can figure out how to turn this. Yep, I'm perfect.
There we go.
Push it up a little bit. Yeah.
All right.
Let's go.
Enlightening, empowering, entertaining. Good morning and welcome to Spectacular Magazine Radio Show. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley, CEO and editor of Spectacular Magazine. Spectacular Magazine Radio Show on Foxy is your community-focused resource. Voting for the Spectacular Magazine 2018 Man of the Year opens today, Sunday, July 8th, and will run through Saturday, July 28th. We have a lot of talented people here in North Carolina. Later in the show, we will talk to a young lady that's on a mission to showcase local talent. On June 29th, the North Carolina General Assembly approved a constitutional amendment that would require voter identification to cast a ballot in North Carolina. The proposal will now be placed on the 2018 general election ballot. Joining me now is Tomas Lopez, Executive Director of Democracy North Carolina. Welcome, Tomas, so much. Thank you for being here today, because this is something that I'm very passionate about.
Well, thank you for having me. It's obviously a really important issue, and I want to make sure that voters are informed about it.
So that people know, tell us a little bit about Democracy NC.
Sure. Democracy North Carolina is a nonpartisan organization. We're not affiliated with any political party. We use field organizing, advocacy, and research to protect the right to vote, to reduce the role of big money in politics, and to fight gerrymandering here in North Carolina.
Okay, so now tell us about this proposed amendment. Explain that to us.
Sure. Well, the first thing that voters should know is that their ballot this November, in addition to all the candidates that they're going to be voting on, they're going to have 6 constitutional amendments that are going to be probably on the back, probably at the end of the ballot, maybe at the very end. These address a range of issues, and this one in particular, this voter ID amendment, would change the state constitution permanently to require people to provide a photo identification in order to cast a ballot.
But didn't we do this already?
You're right. You are right. This sounds familiar. In 2013, the legislature passed a photo ID requirement via the regular legislative process, a regular law. And that photo ID law was actually thrown out in court in 2016. And what the court said was that that provision was illegal.
Okay.
And the reason, with almost surgical precision.
Wow.
And what that means is, when they created the ID requirement, this is in the court case, they were looking at the list of IDs that would be, potentially required under the law. They had access to and saw race-based data on what kinds of identification were disproportionately held by certain kinds of people. And
in this case, Black people.
And so the final list of ID did not include the kinds of ID that were most used by African Americans.
Okay. So what kind of ID, if this passes, what type ID will be accepted?
Well, this is words. The legislature would have to come back.
So we're going to vote on something and we're not real sure what's going to be included in that law.
That's exactly right. All they're saying is we're going to fill in the details later.
Okay, and since everybody has been so honest at the General Assembly, we want to really trust them to do that.
But
one
of the things we know is that the last time there was an ID law, it was thrown out in court for me. One of the things that people who support this amendment are saying is this is a common sense measure. Lots of states have a constitution. And only one of those.
So we would be keeping up with Mississippi.
That is the proposal.
Okay. But if this passes, what does this mean for the Black community?
One of the things we know is that ID laws here and in other places put a disproportionate burden on Black voters in particular. The last time we had an ID requirement was in the 2016 primary. 100 people that ended up not casting ballots that weren't counted because they lacked photo identification. And we know that a high proportion of those folks were African American. And that figure does not come close to including the number of people who may have been confused about what the requirement. I just don't have the kind of ID that they're asking for anyway.
What about early voting? Will we still have as many days?
So we're going to have there's a new law that the legislature passed that we're really concerned is going to make it more difficult for counties to provide early voting in as many places for as many hours as they have in the past. And we're especially concerned about that in small counties.
Okay, so now this is what I don't understand. So if I go to the bank to cash a check, I have to have an ID, picture ID,
Sure.
government issued picture ID.
That's right.
If I do something as simple as order tickets from a concert venue and I go to pick them up, I have to show ID. The problem.
So there are two things that I would point at in response to that. All those
Okay.
things you mentioned, the first thing is that those are all things that require money.
That's okay.
Those are all
true.
things that require
Yes.
money. And
Okay.
voting is something that you're not supposed to have money for that. That's something that every U.S. citizen gets to do. It's a protected right.
Okay.
And while it's true that IDs are a part of our lives in lots of ways, it's also true that we have seen that A, voting is a right, but B, that proposals like this one disproportionately affect certain kinds of people, and we would argue are about affecting the political system.
Okay. All right. So we are just so what they're doing is that they're just doing a blank check, asking us to sign a blank check and give them permission to do this.
That's
I would stand to argue with those people to say that if my vote didn't count, if it doesn't count and it has no value, then people don't go through all of this to take it away.
I think that's an excellent thing too, is that
Okay.
I think when a lot of people hear about an ID requirement, they may look in their wallet and they say, okay, I have an ID. That does not mean that is the particular kind of ID that is going to be counted under a voter ID requirement. And that is one thing that people should be really clear about. That what gets you whatever else you may be doing may not be something that counts at the polls.
Will there be straightforward language? Because when we had to vote on the marriage amendment, the language was very tricky.
Well, that's another big concern. All that's going to be on the ballot is going to say require photo identification to vote. It's not going to say that the details are going to come later. It's not going to provide the important context that this could be a lot. This is going to amend the state constitution. And what's really important to know about that is that it's really hard to change the state constitution. And once this is in there, it's going to be very hard to get it out. And what it also will do is make it difficult for future legislators if for some reason they wanted to.
Tomas, this is something that I think we really need to stay on as a community-focused resource. Our mission is to make sure that people are informed and to make sure, and like I think I told you before when we talked, is to make sure that our community does not miss whatever information is that happens with our nonprofits who are out here working. Would you come back as we get closer to November and just really bring us?
I'll tell you what people should do right now. Also, they can visit our website, democracync.org.
Okay.
We have resources, we have information about this stuff, and they can get involved.
Is it democracy with and then dash NC?
Yes, I think it'll actually come up with or without.
Okay, all right. Okay, so democracync.org, O-R-G.
Yes.
I have been visiting with Tomas Lopez, who is the executive director of Democracy in North Carolina, and we would just want to let you know your voting rights. We'll be right back after a little music. This is Spectacular Magazine Radio Show. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley, on Foxy 107, 104.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And like I said, I don't know. So he said Tracy had been in touch with him, Derek.